Welcome back to Common Sense Rhode Island. I'm Representative Patricia Morgan, and we have with us today John Loughlin, who, a former legislator, has now decided to help the small businessman, or the business community in Rhode Island, by working for the National Federation of Independent Businesses.
Correct.
John, before we go any further, why don't you tell folks what NFIB does?
NFIB's been around for about 72 years, and what makes NFIB different is we're the only business organization that testifies, fights, and wins on both the state and federal level. For example, on the federal level, one of the big accomplishments we got done at the end of this past year was Section 179 of the tax code. And basically 179 said that you could write off $500,000 worth of new investment in equipment, machinery, trucks in a single tax year. But it was a temporary provision. And so had it ever expired, it would drop to $25,000. And one of the things Congress would do is they would play this game where they would come back every December between Christmas and New Year's and have an emergency session and extend the tax code for the next year, the $5,000.
Is that to get more contributions?
You know, I don't know, but the problem is that business owners were reluctant to do anything until they found out whether or not they could write it off.
It was extended.
Right. So one of the things that NFIB fought for and were successful with was to get Section 179 made permanent at $500,000. So now businesses have the predictability to be able to know that, you know what, I can write off what I need to write off.
And we ought to say, $500,000 sounds like a lot of money.
It's really not.
It isn't when you're buying one of these very complicated machines.
Or even if you're a construction company, a dump truck with a lowboy trailer and a bucket loader on it, you're over the top. You've passed $500,000 right there.
Okay, so it's just for small businessmen, it is the equipment of their business. Whether it's a machine shop or
Correct.
A landscaper or...
And you talked earlier, and you made an excellent point about the ripple effect. You know, there are companies, there's a company called, I believe it's MG Material and Handling over in East Providence, and they sell Yale, they're the distributor for Yale forklifts and all that. Forklifts are very expensive. And so now with Section 179 permanent, companies can actually hire and get forklifts and be able to buy them and write them off in a single tax year. So that's huge for that business. Now, if we had more manufacturing...
And it's huge for, even if we don't make them here in Rhode Island, somebody sells them.
Yep, and they have to be transported,
somebody transports them in, some services them, the gears and the things that wear out, right?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So that was Section now. On the federal side, one of the big battles that we see looming, and you know, it all depends on the makeup of the next Congress, and we don't know what that's going to be, but there was a big move in Congress to do away with 1099 employees. They really don't like 1099 employees because it makes it more difficult for Uncle Federal Government to collect taxes from 1099 employees. They want to create a new class of employee called a co-employee. And the way this would work is, let's say I'm building a house and I got to hire a plumber.
Sure.
Plumber's going to be here for 2 weeks because he's got to put in the pipes, put in the toilets.
But he's not a permanent employee.
He would be my co-employee. And I would be responsible for his taxable withholding. I'd be responsible for his insurance. I'd be responsible for his workers' comp. I would be responsible to take money out of his paycheck and pay all that stuff for him. And then at the end of that 2-week period, then let him go.
Yeah, but a 1099, I understand they don't take the taxes out when you're a 1099 employee. 1099 is a form that you get, and the form says, this is what your compensation was.
Correct.
And it is actually sent to the federal government. It's not just sent to the employee, it is sent to the federal government. So they get that. The employee is responsible
to come up with all the deductions and the write-offs. And so one of the things that the federal government is concerned about is...
But the paperwork for a small guy...
Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
Unbelievably hard.
And the compliance. And then that becomes an
auditable document. They don't have to hire an accountant to do everything.
Or what would happen is the small 2, 3, 4 person shop, plumbing shop goes out of business. And eventually it's one giant... They couldn't
afford to do it.
It becomes one giant company that does all of the plumbing because they just can't afford the compliance and all of the other...
Well, and quite frankly, a lot of our high-tech employees are 1099 and they prefer to do that.
Of course they do.
It gives them flexibility in their lives. They can do one job, a software job here for 4 months, 5 months, and then move to another company. It gives them that flexibility.
Yep.
And they would lose that.
They would lose that. The federal government does not like 1099 employees. And the unions don't like them either because you can't organize them, right? So if you have all these co-employees out there, now you've got people you can organize. And so now you can drive those labor costs up even higher.
And we don't need to drive labor costs up higher. It hurts the businesses, it hurts the
It hurts the
consumer.
consumer ultimately because the consumer pays for it.
Okay, so you're fighting that?
Yes, they are.
at the
That's on
federal
the
level.
federal side. And on the state side, you're intimately familiar with what we've been dealing with in terms of, minimum wage. I thank the House. The House seemed to be the common
Steadying
sense
hand
body that didn't increase the minimum wage. Next year's, again, it's like, zombie land. That zombie will be back, I'm sure, and
It comes back all the time. I actually prefer the earned income tax credit,
Mm-hmm.
because that's a tax credit we give to working families.
right.
Right? It rewards work. So if you're a family who's got 2 minimum wage jobs, you get to keep more of that for your family. To me, that's the way to go,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
rather than
because-
squeeze out all those, the entry-level jobs. Then all those teenagers
Right.
are hanging around because they can't get a job.
Another bill, thank you for not passing, was sick leave for minimum wage hourly employees. I always tell the story, my daughter Carrie is working at Gray's Ice Cream, her very
Oh,
first job.
Great ice cream.
And so I guarantee you, Mr. Gray is spending more time, and I love my daughter to tears, don't take this the wrong way, spending more time teaching her how to do that job than productivity he's getting out of her. If over the course of the summer she earns 30 hours of sick leave, guess what she's going to do? Mr. Gray will pay for her to go see a concert. Because
Yes.
she'll just take that sick leave.
It
and
won't
go with it.
because she's sick, right.
And so,
Yeah.
that's, thank you for not passing that, because that in the hospitality industry would have been devastating.
Yeah, devastating for all small employers. Imagine a Subway shop now having, right?
And the other thing that minimum wage, I love how some of the Democratic Party, not all of them, but a lot of them say, you know what, we're the ones protecting our elderly. If it wasn't for us, the elderly would be, well, guess who gets hit the hardest by a minimum wage increase? If you're an elderly person on a fixed income and everything around you gets more expensive because some do-gooder in the General Assembly passed a $15 minimum wage, your compensation doesn't go up because you're on a fixed income. So that means your standard of living has to drop. So it's a wealth transfer from those who have worked their whole lives, paid taxes their whole lives, built this state. It's a wealth transfer from them to minimum wage employees.
Well, and I think it just points out that we aren't doing a good job of growing jobs.
Right.
To me, if we were doing a good job, really making this a state with plentiful jobs, it would take care of itself.
Yes.
Right? Because
Because then you have competition for labor, and labor becomes a
competition
scarce
for
commodity.
laborers, but also you start at minimum wage and then you get the next highest job and the next and the next.
I was meeting
So
with
you-
a tree company, guy that has a massive business, goes all over the state cutting down trees. And he said, John, nobody in my business makes minimum wage. But my problem is, I'll bring someone in at $15 an hour. His friend now just went up to $15 an hour, or 10 or
To
11 or
flip
12
burgers.
to flip burgers. He's going to say, well, why can't I get more?
I'm
So
working
now,
hard, yeah.
I got to pay him more. Well, his supervisor says, well, wait a minute, you just gave him a $4 raise. Why don't I get a raise? And then the manager of that crew,
Sweeps it.
and it just sweeps through the entire business. And he said, so the minimum wage increase just has a ripple effect throughout the entire business. And so he's got to raise prices on everything.
Yeah, yeah. And jobs go away.
Yep, because
As well.
a few jobs go away, so you can pay the additional wages and benefits to the fewer employees.
And it's a quick fix that gets a nice headline. Look at how compassionate we are.
Mm-hmm. With
But-
other people's money.
With other people's money. And what we're not doing is the hard job of fixing what's wrong in our
Right.
economy, which I think is what your organization, NFIB, is really trying to help us do.
Right.
Yeah. All right, we're going to talk a little bit more. We'll be right back.